Now that the cabin is done, I need to make some furniture to match. I'm going to start off by making a small table about 2 feet by 4 feet that'll act as my desk. I have plenty of dimensional lumber scrap around, so I'll be cutting this up and making the stock I need to make the legs, rails, and top. I'm making L-shaped leg blanks. So each of these pieces here will have L glued on like this. This will give these legs a little more heft from a visual perspective without giving them all the bulk of a 4x4. Plus I'll probably put a bit of a taper on them later that'll dress them up just a little bit. I don't have a whole lot of clamps here, so I'm going to glue these together and then screw them to hold them tight, and then I'll take the screws out afterwards. Next, I need to make the rail blanks. Now that I have all my blanks milled up, I'm going to go ahead and rough cut everything to length. I've got 4 leg blanks, 2 short rails, and 2 long rails. This scrap here will be cut into corner blocks to brace the legs once everything's assembled. The next step is to mark out and cut the mortises and tenons. Now I need to take the circular saw and I'm going to gang cut these so that all the cuts are exactly the same depth. I like to take the battery out of my circular saw when I'm adjusting it around the blade. It only takes a moment, but it'll save a finger. Okay, I'm going to finish cleaning these up, make sure they're the right thickness, and then continue on and do all the rest of them. Next, I'm going to lay out for the mortises and the legs. I'm going to go ahead and drill out the mortises where a screw is not in the way. The rest will have to wait till tomorrow. Now that the holes are drilled, I'll clean them out with a chisel. Good morning. The glue is dried. I'm going to go ahead, take the screws out of these legs and finish up cutting the mortises. Now that I've finished the tedious job of chopping out the mortises, I'm going to lay out the taper on the legs and cut them with a circular saw. It's starting to look like a table leg. Next, I want to put on a nice 45-degree camper on all these corners to kind of even it out. And I want to make sure that the joint up here looks right. So I'm going to mark the top edge of where the rails connect. Now I got some sanding to do. Machine sanding is done. Now I need to go and take out all the disc marks with a block and paper. These will be pegged mortise and tenon joints. In order to do that, I've got to cut some pegs. But it's a little tricky with the tools I have. So, more circular saw antics. I don't have any clamps to put this together, so I'm going to have to be a little bit creative. I've got two things to help me out. One is ancient, which is a pegged mortise joint, and the other is new, which is going to be a polyurethane expanding glue. Got two thunderstorms coming in from either side, from the south and from the north. So I guess it's a good time to take a break and let this glue set up. The thunderstorms have come and gone. Now it's time to start working on the top. Dimensional construction lumber comes with the corners all rounded off. This prevents accidents and splinters, but those rounded edges have to come off before I can do a glue up. So the first thing I'm going to do is set this up and mill off about 1/8 inch off of all the edges. Now that my blanks are all milled up, I'm going to organize them on the table so that the best surface is up and in the order in which I want them to be glued together. I'm going to have to do some work with a hand plane to make sure these boards fit flush and even. Working with dull tools is a thankless task. This plane has been kicking around in my bag for a while, and I can already see the blade's got some chips in it. So I need to sharpen it up. First thing I'm going to do is true the back just a little bit. I'm laying it down flat and just sliding it across the surface of the stone. I don't need to do this much. I'm just trying to knock off any burrs on the back of the blade. Once it starts feeling smooth, I'm going to flip it over, hold it at the natural angle of the blade, and continue to grind. This stone has two sides on it, a coarse side and a fine side. I need to put some oil in onto the fine side before I use it, or else the stone will get clogged up and be no good. You'll know when the stone is sharpened when there's a nice mirror smooth polish along the edge of the blade. After the blade has been ground, there'll be a very fine wire along the very tip. If you've got a nice leather strop, you can take it off with that. I never have one around, but I found that a board will work just as well. Once that wire is gone, it should be razor sharp. You can test the quality of the edge by sliding along your fingernail. It should feel smooth and not rough like a saw blade. And it should be able to cut the hairs off the back of your hand. Carefully put your plane back together. This plane uses 2 adjustable screws here to adjust the cut depth. And hopefully I'm ready to go. To use a plane effectively, I'll need a stop. So I'm just going to screw a board onto the end of this. This is going to take a while. Go look at the clouds or something. That'll have to do. I'm going to go ahead and set this up to glue. With only 2 clamps at my disposal, I'm going to again have to be creative, developing a method to clamp this tabletop together. To repeat what I did, I put 2 cleats on either side. They're just wide enough to hold the 4 tabletop blanks. Once they're screwed into place, I hammered these wedges. By the way, the wedges are the waste from the legs. Hammered these wedges in to compress the whole thing together. I screwed this piece on top in case something decides to pop up during the night while I leave it out. And I hammered these wedges in on the side just to add a little bit of extra down pressure. In the meantime, as you can see behind me, I have yet another storm rolling in. This is a crappy desert, I guess. Anyway, I better clean up, and that's it for the night. The glue is set overnight, and I should be able to take off the clamps and see how it looks. Not bad at all. Next, I'll assemble the rest of the base. Bottom's all assembled up. Now I just need to leave it and let that glue set up. The glue is set up nice and hard. Let's take it out of the clamps and see how it looks. I like it. Just need to clean up some glue excess and trim off these pegs, and the base is pretty much ready to go. Need some sanding, of course. I need to put in the corner blocks. I'll make the corner blocks out of the scrap that I set aside earlier. Looks good to me. Now it just needs a final sanding, coat of finish, and it's ready for the tabletop. Let's get this tabletop cleaned up. Well, it's starting to look like a tabletop. I still have the breadboard ends to put on, and a lot more sanding to do. To make those breadboard ends, I'm going to need a 1-inch tenon on each end of the board. In order to make the breadboard end, I need to cut a slot down this piece of wood. Now I'll flip it over, do the other one. Now I've got my two breadboard end blanks. They need to be cleaned out, cut to length, and fitted together. I should be able to finish off this breadboard top this morning. We'll just install the two breadboard ends. They fit on nice. Now we'll drill the pegs and make the final assembly. While laying out the breadboard ends, I noticed something a little embarrassing. My top is too narrow. It doesn't fit on the base right, and I need to glue on one more board. I tried to figure out where I made the error, and I realized what I did is I just put 4 boards in when I meant to put in 5. Anyway, what I've done is remilled one edge smooth and straight, milled off another blank, and I'll glue it up using a variation of the same method I used earlier. I'll put this up and let the glue set, come back to it later. I glued on the 5th board to make the tabletop wide enough and remill the tenons. Now it's time to get back to where we were before, which is fitting and drilling the peg holes for the breadboard ends. Because wood expands and contracts widthwise much more than it does lengthwise as the humidity level changes, I can't leave these holes perfectly round. So what I'm going to do is make the two holes on the outer edges into more of a slot so there's some wiggle room as this panel expands and contracts. Now I just need to let it set up, do the other side, cut it to final width, and sand it. I'll let these dry, give them a final sanding, and put the finish on tomorrow. I'll let this set out and dry and put on a top coat in the afternoon.